something beside me, a light to the kerosene, and the places aren't real anymore, and the faces don't say anything, in the silent light of the mind-blown sphere. It's a game, Devil's Chess Club. Devil's Chess Club.
Welcome to Devil's Chess Club. I'm Aaron Good. In this episode, Bryce, Greene, and I will be talking about a number of subjects, including the high criminality of the ongoing slaughter in the Holy Land, the BRICS summit, and the obscure true story of Watergate. Devil's Chess Club is part of the American Exception podcast. If you want to see this episode in its entirety and have access to the best podcast collection of deep political and historical analysis, if I may say so, please subscribe to the American Exception podcast on Patreon. The URL is patreon.com/American Exception. A link is in the show notes. The more subscribers we have, the more we can do. So if you can afford it, please subscribe to the American Exception podcast on Patreon. Whether you can subscribe on Patreon or not, please kindly like this video and subscribe to this American Exception channel. Bryce, Greene, great to be back with you.
Yeah, it's good to be back, Aaron. It's been a little bit.
Yeah, and many things have been happening here in 2024 in October, and where the election's coming. And before October 7 of last year, I was saying, and there are other people sort of feeling this way too, but I was like, there's definitely going to be crazy things that happen between now and the election. There's no way that it's just going to be America slowly going into imperial decline. There's going to be some crazy dramatic things. And sure enough, we have this war and this terrible genocide in Gaza. And the world saw recently the death of Sinwar, the leader of Hamas. And he went out in a blaze of glory, basically, and Israel decided to show the footage of this. And so he's become kind of an icon and a martyr, even more so than he was before. What do you make of this assassination and its aftermath?
Yeah, I mean, the crazy part is that it wasn't even an assassination, right?
No.
Like Sinwar was just out and about and hand-to-hand combat. And if you read the story, it's like they attacked the building with tanks, and then they sent in some guys in, and then Sinwar threw some grenades down at them, and so they fell back. Then they had to send in this drone to go and scout the area. They were probably thinking there's like 6 guys in there. Then it was Sinwar, and then the iconic stick throw as a last act of defiance. I cannot fathom why the Israelis would release that footage. Like, this is a country that has tight military censorship, right? Like the media is like, oh, we don't want to publish that because that could help the enemy. That's why Jeremy Lafredo was arrested, because he published a video of something that could potentially help the enemy. But they published this major propaganda victory to Hamas, and I mean, Sinwar comes off looking like a hero. And there are people I know who, they were talking about condemning Hamas, like, do you condemn Hamas, blah, blah, blah. They're looking at this and they say, well, I mean, he was fighting to the last breath. And of course, to try and dampen the propaganda victory that Hamas just scored, or an own goal from Israel, they're trying to say that they published footage of what they say is Sinwar going into one of the tunnel networks on October 6th, along with his wife and some kids. They said that the wife is carrying a bag, and the bag is like some $30,000 fancy, I forget the brand. I'm not a purse guy, but it was
Louis Vuitton or something
bag.
like that.
Yeah, something like that. And then you look at the bag that they said is on the website of the whatever company. It looks nothing like the bag. But there were articles in it, like in the crazy Zionist English press, like the Jerusalem Post, Times of Israel, talking about it. I went to the Israel subreddit and they're talking about it. It's so ridiculous. But I mean, they celebrate the death of Sinwar because they don't seem to understand why exactly there's a war to begin. Like why exactly the Palestinians are resisting. They don't understand why people in Lebanon are resisting. They don't understand why the Houthis are doing what they do. They don't understand any of that. So they try to humiliate these people. They say, we killed Nasrallah. Hezbollah's going to fall. We killed Ismail Haniyeh. Hamas is going to fall. We killed Yahya Sinwar. Like, they have no idea what motivates these people. They have no idea that every time you kill one of these leaders and make a big show out of it, you are making and ensuring that 20 more of these leaders will come back up. And it's the logic of empires not to understand that. It's the logic of imperialism and Zionism, especially this like supremacist ideology, not to understand that. If he's giving his life like that, he's a sucker. He's a loser. Why is he doing that? He's dying. He should have stayed alive. They don't understand this deeply rooted concept of self-sacrifice. Because I mean that's what you get from an army whose primary goal is to beat up 12-year-olds and fly drones over heads of people.
Yeah, they. I do think that they have lost the plot, so to speak, and they are seemingly drunk with hubris. I think because of the stranglehold that they believe that they have over the U.S. political system. I mean, if you hear Netanyahu talk about how the Americans will always do what he says and so on, he's had these sort of candid, taped discussions where you hear him say these things. But I think that they just think that they have come to think that they can do whatever, and the U.S. will back them. And when you look at, I mean, the fact that we're in Syria, I think because of Israel. We still have bases in Iraq because of Israel. We probably invaded Iraq largely because of ultra-Zionist neoconservatism. Because I basically find the Vogler book the very illuminating about the oil angle behind there, and then it's the things that didn't exactly make sense before, now they make sense, and it's just that you start to realize the shape of this thing, and they seem to believe that they'll be able to just murder anyone who gets in their way. And because people don't want to get murdered, eventually Israel will be able to triumph, and then they'll be able to have as much of that part of the world as they want or something. But I don't think that that's going to play out this way. And this is what is scary, that they've lost the plot so much that they're doing things like this, which just shows that they think that they want to make a show of how they're able to kill everyone and show that they can murder anyone, and they don't even realize what the opposition that they've roused against themselves. And it's just they're uniting the world against them. I mean, that's what strikes me as the big takeaway, is that if you're not totally absorbing only mainstream media, and you talk to anybody who's halfway aware, then people are going to be exposed to serious, like, anti-Israel sentiment around, and outside of the West, it's even worse. So, I mean, how do they think that this stuff helps them?
I really don't know. Like, I keep saying that Israel is sort of like a mini micro version of the American empire, like accelerated. Like, they had their conquest to wipe out all the natives. They have their political turmoil. They have their corruption. They have their expansionism. But it's on a smaller scale and a bit accelerated. But the same logic that leads America to be like, well, we're going to try and force the whole world to maintain this multipolar order, the rise of Russia, the rise of China. We're just going to fight that head on. We're not going to try and accommodate that. And it's very obviously a path towards disaster. And in Israel, the logic is it's more immediate. It's like, we're going to attack Lebanon now. We're going to attack Iran now. We're going to attack Gaza now. We're gonna start attacking Syria more now. All of these things are destined for disaster. Any adult could tell you that. Anyone with eyes could tell you that. Any Israeli general will probably tell you that. But they're doing it anyway. And so they're accelerating their own demise. I mean, like no one is doing more to destroy Israel than the Israeli politicians, than people like Ben Gvir, than people like the generals. But they seem to be calculating that it's a now or never moment. And even though never seems more likely, the now they're willing to blow up their whole state for the now. And so America is willing to risk nuclear war to prevent China from gaining the upper hand on a global stage, to prevent Russia from gaining the hand. It's all insanity, but it's either come to a reasonable accommodation, which they won't do, continue the escalation, or lose, or like blow up the world. And like they're choosing to blow up the world, and it's sad to see in both quarters, because there are no forces that seem to be mobilizing against us. Like there doesn't seem to be a big constituency within the Israeli political system that actually has the power to arrest this, that has the power to stop this, the same way in the United States.
Well, yeah, we'll come back to this because this is related to something else. But first, I want to point out that among other reprisals that have been going on, and the sort of normal kind of attrition, I believe, of the missile defense stocks, especially of the IDF and so on. Among the measures taken by the resistance was an attack on Netanyahu's home, and he's called it an assassination attempt, which I guess they wouldn't have been sad if the drone had landed on Netanyahu's head. But, as much as anything, it was a signal of sorts. But what did you make of this attack on Netanyahu's house, and are you worried about Mr. Netanyahu?
Yeah, so there have been a lot of attacks on the Israeli heart, like inside of Israel, like in Tel Aviv, around military facilities, especially in the Negev with those military facilities there, and all of this is kind of waking a lot of Israelis up. You see articles every day about the number of people who are just up and leaving. There are people who have rejected their like residency. There have been millions of people who are taking like extended vacations, and this fits into this broader pattern of the Israelis not being equipped to handle what these other less technologically sophisticated actors can throw at it. There was an interview with I can't remember the geopolitical analyst, but they made the comment that Iran doesn't have to do much to get Israel to beat Israel in the war of attrition. They have time on their side. If they send a rocket over Tel Aviv, once every couple days, that's not something that the Israelis are used to. That's not something that they would be able to keep up. The idea that you could hit the the vacation home of Prime Minister Netanyahu was unthinkable to so many of these people. And so they're not going to tolerate that. It seems like it's either like they're either going to completely dissolve as a society. I mean, there are Israeli generals who are saying that Israel won't exist in 5 to 10 years if we keep up doing what we're doing. And I think attacks like this really underscore that, really highlight just how little prepared they are to live in a world where they're constantly under attack.
Yeah, and it seems that this onslaught is the siege of Gaza, the Gaza genocide is. They're not going to be able to carry that out peaceably. The Hezbollah will keep attacking in the north, and this will be driving more people out of the country. The Houthis are going to be disrupting trade in the Red Sea. There's the potential that the Russians and Syrians together could boot the Americans from the place. I mean, they've been attacking the militants lately, but like I think part of what they're doing there is to say like we know that these are areas you're in, and you see us attacking here, and you're not there legally. We're within our rights to attack you. I feel like that's part of the message being sent. And
yeah, they've already attacked a few bases directly in Syria. I think last week.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that different resistance groups have, and so on. So this is in Iraq as well. They've had the sort of reprisals on these things. So the position is more precarious, and the U.S. What the U.S. is trying to do is difficult to discern here, and I think we'll try to sort some of that out. But yeah, as you say, the position of Israel with its own population wanting to leave, and the fact that, so if they keep on with the war, then you're going to see more and more people want to leave Israel because they're not going to be able to continue the genocide peacefully. But if they stop, if they do have a ceasefire in Gaza, I believe that the pressure for the international pressure for the creation of a Palestinian state is going to be insurmountable at this point. Now the whole world is, if Trump is elected, which looks possible, who seems to be Israel's guy. The thing about that is, yeah, you might have a person who's more committed to backing Zionism to the hilt, but he's alienating to the rest of the world. The rest of the world is kind of, weirded out by the fact that he is the leader of the U.S. It just is weakening U.S. hegemony. So if they do recognize a Palestinian state as a full member state, then that would seem to be potentially the end of Israel, because how are you going to deal with those settlers? And it may well lead to a civil war, and then more of the people will want to leave Israel if they're halfway sensible. Those settlers are nuts. And if you're halfway sensible and you see where Israel's going and you're educated and you can live elsewhere, you probably want to get out of there. So it does look really bad for them.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen this general's plan that they're trying to carry out in the north. This plan that was put out by this group of retired generals, or like this professional association. It's just an ethnic cleansing plan for the north of Gaza to try and force everyone out, and to say, if you're still here, well, then you're fair game. It's just a free fire zone, just the same thing that was going on in Vietnam, except here it's more targeted. It's like a tiny area, and we've already seen reports from all sorts of sources about summary executions, separating the women and children, mass graves being dug. But the problem with that is that even if they successfully cleanse that whole area, they are not in a position to maintain control. Throughout this whole war, there's been this pattern of Israelis declaring an area, free and clear of Hamas, only to have Hamas reemerge in that area a few months later. Just because they don't have the ability to fully secure this area. And that's what's going to happen in the whole of Gaza, even if Israel gets its wish. That's true regardless.
Yeah, it's like they're going to be playing whack-a-mole. I mean, with all those tunnels, they're basically trying to play whack-a-mole, except that behind them, the moles pop up and shoot them. I mean, I'm not trying to compare them to animals. I just mean the game. The game itself, when you think about it, is like, do you want to be playing that forever, where they shoot you if if you don't whack them? I mean, it's just like it's sick. It's like some kind of it's like the frontier where they would pay people for scalps or something, and you just want to do this forever. But this is 2024. The world is watching. You can't just go and murder people like this. It's so sickening. It's just sickening to the whole world.
Like bombing the UN. Like that,
yeah.
Bombing UN peacekeepers just openly and brazenly, saying that they were paid by Hezbollah. It's blatant, and it's thinking people understand this, which is why Israel realizes that they have a limited time to do what they want to do.
Yeah, but what they want to do is just making everything worse. And when Netanyahu gets out there and says, I cannot believe the anti-Semitism we see from the UN, it's infuriating. Let's try to. I want to look at this to try to figure out what exactly the U.S. is doing, because this is something that people want to argue about a lot. Is Israel just doing is this the U.S. wanting this so that they can maintain control over the Middle East, or is Israel just out of control, insane, and damaging to the U.S.? So there are disagreements among critics of U.S. foreign policy as to what exactly the intentions are of the U.S. Do they want this war in Iran or this regional war in the Middle East, or are they trying to restrain Israel? And to this story, we have to add this newest development, which is a bunch of documents were leaked, or a few documents were leaked. And I'll just read this short summary here. Leaked top-secret documents from the Pentagon and the National Security Agency outline Israeli preparations for a major attack against Iran, CNN reported on Saturday. The documents were published Friday on a Telegram channel said to be affiliated with Iran named Middle East Spectator that claims it received the information from a source within a U.S. intelligence agency. Besides the U.S., these documents, dated October 15 and 16, were only meant to be viewed by officials in Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Washington's Five Eyes allies. Those spying on each other. CNN cites 3 people familiar with the matter, including one that confirmed the document's authenticity. The documents can be viewed, yada, yada. So the documents, which themselves don't, I'm not going to try to summarize the whole things, but you can actually see that they do have photos of the documents that were leaked. And this part is interesting. According to CNN, one of the documents reveals that Israel maintains a nuclear weapons arsenal, which for decades has been an open secret. This is highly controversial, as amendments made to U.S. foreign assistance laws by U.S. Senators Symington and Glenn in '76 make Washington's huge military aid to Israel illegal because Tel Aviv is not a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Successive U.S. presidents since Nixon, including Biden most recently, have agreed with their Israeli counterparts to never acknowledge Israel's approximately 90 to 300 nukes. So this is interesting. This document comes out and it does reveal aspects of an attack on Iran. So potentially that could be making it complicated to try to launch such an attack. And these documents include admission of the nuclear issue. So of course, we can't really know for sure who this leaker is and what their motivation is, but what do you make of this leak and its impact?
Well, it's hard to figure out what the leak could be, like why someone would leak this. Maybe there's someone who sees the horror on its way and is trying to get the information out. But what's fascinating is that these documents are one of, if not one of the first, on-paper admissions from American government sources about Israel's nuclear weapons. And if anyone in Congress were trying to stop the American support for Israel, trying to stop the genocide, well, this would be a wedge issue that they now have documented proof that they could use to try and push the American public, the American foreign policy establishment, to actually follow America's laws, follow the international laws, and not provide weapons to someone who's illegally proliferating nuclear weapons. But they don't do that because they don't care, because some of them are actually in favor of this big attack on Iran. And I might have mentioned this on the show a while ago, but there was that Brookings Institution paper, Which Path to Persia, talking about the different ways that the U.S. could achieve its goal of neutralizing and attacking Iran. And there's a whole chapter in that paper called "Leave It to Bibi." It's about allowing or encouraging an Israeli military strike, and it talks about what the goals are pretty clearly. It says, I'm gonna read a bit here because it's worth talking about. It's saying that an added element could be that the United States would encourage and perhaps even assist the Israelis in conducting the strikes themselves, in the expectation that both international criticism and Iranian retaliation would be deflected away from the United States and onto Israel. It's just a way to advance this neocon goal, this long-term John Bolton neocon goal of striking Tehran, striking their nuclear facilities, neutralizing that whole country, by using Israel to do it. And part of the rest of this paper talks about the need to have public condemnations of Israel's actions, have public hesitation, talk about how we are not in favor of all this. We would want them to stop, but still supporting it in order to, again, deflect that criticism away. And so it's unclear how much this faction controls American foreign policy versus how many people are genuinely concerned about starting a regional war. Publicly, the Biden administration's posture is to avoid a regional escalation. Sure, Israel can smash Gaza. Sure, they can do some damage in Lebanon. But a direct Israel-Iran confrontation is very dangerous and could be destabilizing and would not benefit the U.S. But there's, of course, those crazies who believe they have the maniacal view of finally attacking Iran and destabilizing that regime and shifting the balance of power in the Middle East into the West. It's unclear how many of them are on that team, but this document from the Brookings Institution and this document that is leaked, I mean, it seems to indicate that this is the plan that's being carried out. And back to this theme of now or never, I mean, you're starting to see Iran, over the last few years, Iran is normalizing with the rest of the world. You saw the normalization with Saudi Arabia a few years ago. That was major. Well, what seems to be even more major now is that there was a report earlier today or last week or yesterday or something about Iran, Saudi Arabia, and a third country that I can't remember doing joint naval drills together. Like that would be astounding. And if Saudi Arabia and Iran got closer together, that would make it a lot harder to do for Israel and the U.S. To carry out their policy against Iran or to carry out their general destabilizing policy in general. So you have this now or never moment, and there was a report that said that the Americans and the Israelis were going to wait until after the election. I think the Biden administration had said that, wait until after the election to carry out this strike. But it seems very possible that it's coming, and that the big one is on its way.
Yeah, I mean, we'll find out what the U.S. does. If the U.S. enters in, then it's going to suggest that all of the administration statements about having any concerns about what Israel was doing were, disingenuous, most likely. And so we will see. I mean, I think that the neocon perspective is pushed so much in official Washington and in think tank land that, I mean, there's really even like somebody like Obama, who seems to be the non-neocon candidate relative to John McCain, who would sing about bombing around, and then Obama does sign the, he arranges the JCPOA and some other little things that, and Netanyahu really hated Obama reportedly. But even Obama had his like Rahm Emanuel connection. I mean, Rahm Emanuel was like, his dad was like a terrorist, like one of Israel's founding terrorist dudes. So it's like, this is even that part of the establishment is not, even if he's the less neocon character, he still like supports the Arab Spring Wars. He brings in Rahm Emanuel, who's a despised person by and large, is just basically a Zionist hatchet man. It's this hold over the establishment is horrific, and some are suggesting that, which I find plausible, that because the U.S. position is so degraded in the rest of the world and they've lost everywhere else, that this beachhead is more significant. But the irony is, of course, that the reason that the U.S. has become so has seen its position deteriorate so much is because of all these neocon policies like NATO expansion and all these wars in Israel, which are all neocon projects. So they essentially, which I think is exactly what the ultra-Zionist neocons would have wanted, they've wedded them to this. It's either the empire is only going to be this way or it's going to be no empire at all. And for the U.S. people who are dedicated to empire now, they're sort of in for a penny, in for a pound, and like, are they going to let Israel go down? Even though it seems like they may not be able to do anything to prevent it, because if they do go to war with Iran and it destroys all the oil infrastructure around the Gulf and so on, this will lead to an energy crisis. And I don't think that even though the U.S. is an oil producer now, I don't think that they can really recreate like the dynamics of the early 70s, except with them as their own Saudi Arabia now because of their oil production. Like, I don't think that the U.S. would be able to pull a rabbit out of its hat that way. So this is why time will tell if this ends up being something that forestalls a war, or maybe this would forestall it long enough for the BRICS summit to wrap up, and then Russia and Iran will announce that other conditions of their military alliance. But Iran has also been talking about it already having basically missiles that are as destructive as nuclear missiles, and we know that they have hypersonic missiles that can get through Israeli air defenses. So it could be that if they attack Iran, Iran is going to strike back, and Israel is small enough that Iran could basically blow up most of what it wants to blow up. And then what is Israel even fighting for at that point?
Yeah, and that's the big thing. Like Israel has I think probably 3 major power stations that Iran has already demonstrated that it could target. If those power stations go, there's no Israel. Like there's no settlements, there's no apartheid apparatus, there's no military. Because I mean, they have no power. If they have no power, what are they going to do? It's the same reason that Israel bombs power stations in Gaza, the same reason that they bomb critical infrastructure in Lebanon. Because like once you do that, the society will crumble. The difference is Israeli society is not designed to exist without that stuff. The Palestinians in Gaza have had to adapt. The Lebanese have had to adapt because they've been under attack. But Israel, for all their claims of victimization, has never been at a point where the people have to endure major privations. They've never been to the point where they have to be genuinely worried. They might be fake worried, but be genuinely worried about getting blown up, like walking down the street. And so that is going to tear Israel's fabric apart. And of course, you have all the other economic problems that are being talked about. I mean, all these corporations are leaving. They have no cheap labor from the Palestinians. Their credit rating is now like depleting, like from like the Moody's credit agency,
like Zimbabwe now.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're crumbling. And so every single day in the Israeli press, there are people writing op-eds talking about or writing reports about the different ways in which Israel is absolutely screwed. Even if it were to stop today, it's absolutely screwed. But they have no intention of stopping today. There was a ceasefire order or a ceasefire offer from Israel to Lebanon, talking about implementing that old UN resolution that ended the '82 invasion, about reaffirming that would remove the Israeli military from Lebanon, that would remove the Lebanese and Hezbollah military from like the southern border, but would give Israel the right to invade southern Lebanon whenever they want to inspect their security needs. And
yeah, it's like the Platt Amendment. The Platt Amendment for Cuba, where it's like you get to be sovereign, but we can invade anytime we want.
Exactly, and that's really what it is. And Lebanon, obviously, like Hezbollah, is obviously not going to accept that. And so you continue this trend of Israel putting forth ridiculous ceasefire offers, other people rejecting them, and then Western media, and especially Israeli media, talking about how, wow, the other guy just really doesn't want peace.
Yeah. Thanks to Dana Chavarria for producing this episode, and thank you for tuning in. The rest of this episode contains our discussion on the BRICS summit and our discussion on Watergate. Did you know that the ultra-militarist U.S. officers who were caught spying in the Nixon White House were never prosecuted or punished by President Nixon? That the Watergate plumbers were all hard right-wingers who, like the military brass, opposed Nixon's peaceful moves toward China and the Soviet Union? Were you aware that the burglars had explosive connections to the mob's CIA-linked drug trafficking operations? Did you know that the most sensitive aspects of our clandestine operations, including assassinations of U.S. officials deemed to be security risks, were also in the hands of CIA officer James Angleton, an anti-Nixon and anti-JFK hardliner who also handled the so-called Israel account, which apparently included the pinnacle of organized crime, the Lansky Syndicate? Did you know that a Lansky-linked sexual blackmail operation was being run out of the DNC's Watergate office, and that it had apparently compromised key Nixon officials like John Dean and Magruder? It's a very wild tale, to say the least. If you subscribe to the American Exception podcast on Patreon, you can hear more about Watergate in the rest of this episode and in other American Exception episodes. There you will find the best coverage and analysis of the deep politics of the U.S. empire. The URL is patreon.com/American Exception. It's also in the show notes. If you can afford it, please subscribe. The neocon takeover of the apex of U.S. foreign policy is an obscure and hugely important part of U.S. and world history. Organized crime and the organized criminal essence of capitalism have propelled the U.S. to global dominance. But these same forces have dialectically conjured nemesis for the white capitalist West. Their depravity has united the global majority as never before against the true enemy of humanity, the imperialist order that seeks to subjugate and exploit the human race in perpetuity. As this unfolds, we will keep bringing you the news about the games being played on the devil's chessboard.